The rain came down in sheets, a cold, relentless curtain washing the grime from the streets of Seattle. Inside a modest apartment, the phone rang, shattering the evening's quiet. A man in his late 40s picked it up. His voice was calm, ordinary. But the voice on the other end was not. It was a ghost, a whisper from a life he had buried 2 decades ago. The message was simple, a prearranged code, and it meant only one thing: they had found him. After 20 years of freedom, of building a new identity from the ashes of his old one, the most elusive fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list had just run out of time. But how did he get here? How did a man, once a trusted member of the U.S. government, vanish so completely that he became a legend, a phantom haunting the darkest corners of the Bureau's files? This is not just the story of a crime. It is a masterclass in disappearance, a chilling exploration of how one man outsmarted the entire apparatus of American justice for a generation. By the end of this video, you will understand the meticulous, almost obsessive steps he took to shed his old life like a skin. You will learn how he crafted a bulletproof new identity, not from forged documents bought in a back alley, but from the genuine records of the deceased. You will discover the psychological fortitude required to live a lie every single day, to build relationships, hold a job, and become a part of a community, all while knowing that a single misstep, a single moment of nostalgia, could send you to a prison cell for the rest of your life. We will dissect the FBI's relentless pursuit, the cold cases that were reopened, the technological leaps that finally closed the net, and the shocking moment of capture that ended one of the longest manhunts in American history. The man we now know as William Donald Garcia was once someone else entirely. His name was Robert James Nichols, a former State Department communications specialist with a top-secret security clearance. In the early 1980s, Nichols was entrusted with sensitive information, a player in the high-stakes game of Cold War intelligence. But beneath the surface of the dutiful civil servant, a storm was brewing. He was living beyond his means, accumulating gambling debts that spiraled into the tens of thousands. Desperation became his co-pilot. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a simple, yet catastrophic, betrayal. In 1985, Nichols was accused of selling classified information to a foreign intelligence agent. The evidence, while circumstantial, was mounting. He was facing not just the loss of his career, but espionage charges that could put him behind bars for life. The walls were closing in, and Robert Nichols knew it. He was released on bail, a temporary freedom that felt more like a stay of execution. The problem was absolute: a life in prison or a life on the run. For Nichols, the choice was clear. He had to vanish. He didn't just run, he planned. In the weeks before his final court appearance, while his public defender prepared a weak defense, Nichols was preparing for his own death. He spent hours in libraries, not researching legal precedent, but studying obituaries. He was looking for a specific kind of ghost, a boy born around the same time as him, who had died in childhood. He needed a clean identity, one that would hold up under the scrutiny of a driver's license application or a background check for a menial job. He found his target in William Donald Garcia, a child from a small town in Texas who had died of leukemia at the age of 6. Nichols rode away for a copy of the birth certificate. With that single vital document, the first brick of his new life was laid. He obtained a social security number, using the birth certificate as proof of identity. He began the slow, patient process of building a paper trail, applying for a library card, a membership to a video store, anything that would add layers of authenticity to the phantom he was becoming. The day of his preliminary hearing, Robert Nichols did not show up. He left his apartment clean, with no note, no clue, and very little cash. The FBI was confident. In an age before facial recognition software and nationwide digital databases, they believed he would be found within weeks. They staked out his known associates, monitored his family, and tracked his financials. But there was nothing. Nichols had not contacted anyone from his old life. He had not used his credit cards or tried to access his bank accounts. It was as if he had simply stepped off the face of the earth. The initial investigation hit a wall. The only lead was the missing birth certificate of William Garcia, but with no connection to Nichols, it was a dead end, a single thread in a vast national tapestry. The case grew cold, and Robert Nichols earned a spot on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, a ghost haunting a file folder in Washington, D.C. The man who was once Robert Nichols was now Will Garcia. He traveled not by plane or train, but by bus and by hitchhiking, paying for everything in cash. He avoided large cities, settling instead in anonymous suburban towns where newcomers were not unusual. He took jobs that paid under the table at first: dishwasher, day laborer, janitor. He was quiet, polite, and kept to himself. He never spoke about his past, deflecting questions with vague, manufactured memories of a childhood in the Midwest. He was a blank slate, and he carefully curated the image of a simple, uncomplicated man. He understood that the key to remaining hidden was not just a false name, but a consistent and believable performance. He avoided conflicts, never got into legal trouble, and paid his taxes on time using his new Social Security number. Each year that passed, each tax return filed, each lease signed, solidified the existence of William Garcia. He was no longer just pretending. On paper and in the eyes of his neighbors, he was real. As the years turned into a decade, the FBI's investigation languished. Agents retired, leads dried up, and the case of Robert Nichols became a legend used to train new recruits, a cautionary tale of the one that got away. The world changed dramatically around the fugitive. The Cold War ended. The Internet was born. Cell phones became ubiquitous. With each technological leap, the FBI gained new tools. They ran old evidence through new databases. They employed advanced forensic accounting. But they were still missing the most crucial piece: a face. The photograph of Robert Nichols in his 20s bore little resemblance to a man nearing 50. Yet, inside the fugitive, a different kind of change was taking place. Loneliness was a constant state. He could not form truly intimate relationships, because intimacy requires honesty, and his entire life was built on a lie. He had romantic partners, but always kept them at a distance. He made friends, but would pull away whenever they grew too curious. He lived in a state of perpetual vigilance, a state that, over time, morphed from acute paranoia into a low, constant hum of background anxiety. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar car parked outside his home, every call from an unknown number sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system. He was a prisoner in a jail of his own making, a jail with no bars but just as heavily guarded. The feeling of freedom was an illusion. He had merely traded a smaller cage for a larger one. In 2005, nearly 20 years after Nichols' disappearance, a breakthrough emerged. It was not a dramatic discovery, but a product of dogged persistence and a fresh pair of eyes. An FBI analyst, revisiting the cold case, decided to try a new approach. Instead of looking for Robert Nichols, they would start looking for William Garcia. They theorized that Nichols had successfully obtained the identity and had been using it all these years. They scoured national databases for every William Donald Garcia and began the painstaking process of elimination. It was a mammoth task, with hundreds of names. But they were looking for specific parameters. A Garcia who appeared at the right time, one with no verifiable early life history. And in the Seattle area they found one. A William Garcia who seemed to only exist from the mid-1980s onward. He had a valid Washington state driver's license, held a Social Security number, and had a steady work history. When the analyst digitally aged the photo from the driver's license and compared it to the old photos of Robert Nichols, hearts stopped. The spacing of the eyes, the shape of the nose, the bone structure. It was a match, despite the age, the added weight, the gray hair. They had finally found their ghost. The FBI did not move in immediately. They wanted to be certain of their evidence, and they wanted to understand the full scope of his life. They placed him under surveillance and discovered that Garcia lived in an ordinary apartment complex, worked as a manager at a small printing shop, and was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Susan, who knew nothing of his true past. It was unsettling to see him living such a normal, mundane life. He wasn't a criminal hiding in a sewer. He was a man with neighbors, responsibilities, a life. The contrast made his 20-year deception all the more staggering. The takedown was planned with extreme care. They knew they could not risk him running again. They decided to take him on his way to work, in a controlled environment. On a crisp November morning in 2005, Will Garcia locked his apartment door and walked towards his decade-old Honda, just like any other day. He was thinking about work, about his plans with Susan that evening, about the mundane details of a life. It was then that the quiet neighborhood suddenly sprang to life. Cars screeched out from side streets, blocking the road. Men and women in flak jackets, their weapons drawn, emerged from all directions. FBI! Get on the ground! Now! The shouts cut through the morning calm. The look on his face was not one of shock from a fugitive discovered, but more like a man brutally awakened from a 20-year dream. His shoulders slumped, not in resistance, but in a deep, almost relieved exhaustion. He did not struggle. As the agents cuffed him and read him his rights, he was perfectly quiet. Then he uttered the words they had waited 20 years to hear. "I'm Robert Nichols." 2 decades of hunting ended not with a bang, but at a stop sign on a quiet, ordinary suburban street. But the most shocking part of the story was yet to come. As Nichols sat in a jail cell, awaiting extradition back to Washington, D.C., the lead FBI agent on the case spoke with him. They wanted to know how he had done it. After years of silence, perhaps out of a strange sense of pride, or maybe just a desire to finally unburden himself, Nichols opened up. He described his research into identity acquisition, how he had chosen the name Garcia, how he had built his credit history with small, timely loans. He explained his rules. Never contact the past, never commit a crime, stay. Then he revealed the ultimate, chilling irony. He had chosen Seattle not because it was remote, but because it was a major tech boom city. He reasoned that in a fast-growing city full of new arrivals, a newcomer would not attract a second glance. He had been hiding in plain sight, and the strategy had worked for nearly 2 decades. But what struck the agents most was what they found when they searched his apartment. In a box in the back of a closet, neatly stored, was a stack of newspaper clippings. All of them were about himself. About his disappearance, about the FBI's search, about his status as a most wanted fugitive. For 20 years, he had been following the hunt for himself. He had been reading the legends about Robert Nichols like an audience member watching a movie about someone else's life. The legend of Robert James Nichols did not end with gunfire or a high-speed chase, but with a soft-spoken admission and the cold click of handcuffs. He would eventually plead guilty to the espionage charges and was sentenced to a long prison term. He died behind bars in 2019, a man who had disappeared in a pre-digital age, finally caught by the technology of the era he had lived through. His story leaves a complex legacy. On one hand, it is a cautionary tale about crime, a man who betrayed his country and evaded punishment for 2 decades. But on the other, it is a disturbing study in human resilience. It raises profound questions about the nature of identity itself. Are we merely the sum of our documents? Can a person truly erase their past and start anew? Nichols proved that, for long enough and with enough discipline, it is possible. But he also proved the immense cost of such a life. The constant paranoia, the emotional isolation, the knowledge that everyone you love and who trusts you does so based on a massive, profound lie. He had gained his freedom, but he had never found peace. In the end, perhaps the capture was a relief, a chance to finally stop performing, to finally be Robert Nichols again, even if it was within the walls of a prison. The story of one of the longest hidden fugitives on the FBI's 10 most wanted list is not, ultimately, a story about escape, but a story about the price. The chase doesn't end here. We are constantly unearthing forgotten case files and piecing together the puzzles of history's most brazen escapes. This is more than a story. It's an invitation to a community of investigators. Join our inner circle to access exclusive, in-depth breakdowns, behind-the-scenes insights, and a front-row seat to the unraveling of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries.